The real value of social media is that now large populations of people in every industry are moving onto those platforms. That's where they spend their time. So it's an opportunity to get their attention and to build relationships. You know, and all business, all B2B has always been about relationships. And so this is just a new tool to help engage these people. It's long been known that for lawyers to be rainmakers, for them to develop business, they need to have relationships. And the value of their relationships is directly proportional to how much success they have. And so when you add a tool like social media and you add blogs to the picture, well, lawyers are outstanding writers. Most of them are, wordsmiths. And so it's a good fit for them to start blogging and using social media to communicate with people, because they're usually very good at coming across through the written word. One question we hear a lot from attorneys is, anybody I do business with using social media? And the statistics show that a high percentage of in-house counsel are using Facebook and LinkedIn. Facebook, of course, is still used for personal reasons, but I think the statistics showed something like 45% of in-house counsel had been on LinkedIn in the last 24 hours for business reasons. So, they're populations that are there, so it's opportunity to get touches and have contact with these people. Lawyers have been a little bit behind when it comes to social media, but it depends on the practice area. For example, IP lawyers, in the biggest numbers, they've been adopting social media. But big numbers means, I think the statistics coming out of the ABA were 9% of IP lawyers are using social media. The adoption rate is much lower for other types of other practice areas. But so, it makes sense the more tech-savvy lawyers are adopting it. But you would expect, with how popular this is, with how much people talk about social media, that it would be a given. That all tech lawyers would be using social media. But that's not really the case yet. The question, does social media bring in business, is really very similar to a question like, does the telephone bring in business? Social media is just a tool, and it's all about who's on the other end, who's using it. I think there's this misconception about social media that if law firms and lawyers start blasting out content there, that their phone will ring and they'll be hired. But it's just like any other tool. It's about building relationships. And if they can start relationships online and then move them offline as soon as possible, create appointments, lunches, phone calls, that's what it's all about. Probably the most important thing that the firms I'm working with are doing that are really making them have success is that they're finding champions within the firm. And when I talk about champions, I'm not talking about a tech-savvy marketing director. I'm talking about practice group leaders, rainmakers, and leaders within the firm that are learning to use social media and practicing these behaviors on a regular basis. So they're sending tweets, they're blogging, and they're participating in that online community. Because it really takes that level of engagement for there really to be success with what they're doing. The biggest challenge law firms are coming up against, and partly because they don't understand the tools, is it's a manpower issue. So I talked to a head of publishing for a major global law firm a couple weeks ago, and this individual told me, I've been asked to do all the tweeting for my whole law firm. They have over 1,000 lawyers, and she's supposed to do all the tweeting. And it just doesn't make sense, right? So the challenge is that they're trying to give the job of hundreds of people and just have one person do all the work. They'll never have enough manpower, but not only that, it's not gonna be effective to just have one person sending all the messages for a whole global organization. So, I like to use the term, you need to give fire to the natives. You need to give the power to individuals, attorneys, to go out there, give them a chance to go after it. When it comes to distribution specifically, the problem with law firms is they want to create one Twitter account and have that account share all the messages about whether it's environmental law, whether it's about litigation. It's all coming out from the same Twitter account. And really, if you think about this like a TV channel, that's like having one TV channel that shows, the whole 200 different programs. It just doesn't make sense. It makes much more sense to have multiple accounts that are specialized. So for example, a practice group that does environmental law, maybe you have the attorney that's over that practice group, he sends out the messages, and then there's a person and a face on the other end. So if someone has a question, they don't say to this logo, hey, I have a question. They can say to this individual, or they can call the firm and say, I'd like to talk to this individual because I've seen the quality of the content that he as an individual posts. So it's really about building the big brand by developing these small brands that will show that they're thought leaders in the space. A lot of firms are asking, how should we use blogs? And there's kind of two schools of thought on it. The first is the personal blog. An individual that's an expert in a certain subject matter, they can have their own blog and post on a regular basis about that topic. And it shows them as an expert, gives them opportunities to speak and build relationships. I see that as the ideal model. Kind of a second best to that is to have the group blog. And most firms with very busy attorneys, this makes more sense to them because the work can be shared by a bunch of people. So there could be, returning to the environmental law, there could be an environmental law blog where everybody's assigned a blog post once every month, and so they have something new every week on the post. The problem there is, first off, nobody really owns the blog, and so who benefits? The practice, maybe they benefit, but if people are buying legal services based on relationships, that doesn't really get you there. The other problem is that, and it's part of the same thing, is the incentive. How are the individual attorneys incentivized to take their valuable time and dedicate there if they're not individually going to see payout? I mean, I know it seems selfish, but I mean, let's be honest, lawyers are motivated by building their personal book of business, and that's where you're going to see them putting the time and dedication it really requires to make it work for them. For law firms to be able to develop good social media practices and good blogging practices, they need to develop those expertise. Some firms have that expertise in-house. If they don't, there are a number of places they can go, third parties that can build them blogs, and there's a number of organizations that can help train their people to use these tools correctly. But many firms make the mistake of thinking that this is simple and they can do it for themselves. So there are a lot of great blogs that talk about how to do this right. And so if your firm has someone that has the time to go out and dedicate themselves and learn that stuff, they can absolutely do this themselves. But it takes someone that has the passion and that can really get involved in the community to make that happen. Otherwise, I recommend that they bring in some outside help. The first impediment for all firms is a good social media policy. There's so much fear and anxiety about, are we going to expose ourselves by using social media, that most firms just say, until we have a clear policy, we're not going to use social media, and then they drag their feet on writing the policy. So a clear policy has to be written, and the policy has two specific goals. The first goal is to protect the firm. You're going to train the attorneys so they know what is allowed and what's not, and so they have in mind that everything they write is there forever, right? The second goal is to encourage them to use social media in the right ways. So it's really about, here's how you can use it strategically, by being a good part of this online community, by sharing things other people share, sharing things of value rather than just being self-promotional. And it's kind of those two types of training that need to be part of that policy. Now, once they have that policy in place, then it's time to really launch into social media. So find the people that are the best fit within your organization. And there's a very kind of special characteristic. There's some special characteristics that make a good fit for a social media champion. These aren't the most tech-savvy people at your firm, right? The first person to get an iPod at your firm, I mean, I'm sorry to say, but they're probably not the most popular person. They tend to be somewhat introverted. As a technology geek, I happen to take this personally, but often the best people are people that obviously they're not afraid of the technology, but they're well liked and they're leaders within the firm. And take some of those champions, give them the tools, have them get some wins for the firm, have them bring in the first clients, and then the other people will follow. So I mean, it's a simple model that's been used for training for for a long time, but really finding some influencers within your organization to be the champions, I think is the first step.